morning to all of you. I'm Dr. Vibha, DG TERI, and I'm very pleased to welcoming all of you to this particular session on plastics and circular economy, making EPR workable. We all are aware what kind of problems plastic is creating for all of us. We are talking of plastic in the terrestrial ecosystem and so in the marine ecosystem. And because it takes such a long time to degrade, it's not degradable, that once it's enter our ecosystem, it is there for many years. And therefore, it becomes very important to work towards how do we reduce the plastic waste and thus protect our environment and also recycle the plastic so that you are not just saving money, it is also that your entire footprint on GHG gets reduced. I'd like to welcome Mr. Heinz Stendrel, Senior Principal Scientist, CSIRO, Circular Economy Initiative, Mr. Hans-Peter Egler, Director, Sustainable Infrastructure and Plastic Affairs, South Pole, Mr. Rajesh Pehwa, Founder and CEO, 21st Century Polymers, Dr. Lakshmi Ragupathi, Advisor, Foundation for Innovative Packaging and Sustainability, Dr. Shilpi Kapoor, Vice President, EMC, Ms. Ekta Narayan, Co-Founder, Rekla. Plastics has replaced many other raw materials. We do recall that when we were things back was a cloth bag or a fancy jute bag. And even the milk will come in glass bottles and there will be metal containers and so on. But over years, all the Tetra Paks, other things to quite an extent has been replaced by plastic, and that's largely because of its convenience, durability, economic viability, and wide availability. It is produced with wide variety of material properties that allows adaptations into several applications. However, this choice of convenience has become a nightmare for humankind in terms of waste generation, pollution release, and its management. TERI's work under Indo-Australia Research Collaboration for reducing plastic waste is an extremely relevant project as both the countries are actively pursuing their sustainability goals of reducing plastic waste. There are 3 organizations from each country, and these organizations are, of course, TERI, Development Alternatives, Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, through NERI, that is Environment Engineering Research Institute. From Australian side, it's University of New South Wales, University of Technology Sydney, and CSIRO. This project has already completed 1 year, and TERI has mapped the material flows of several polymers across different sectors in the country. India's active initiative towards solving the plastic problem is evident from several recent policy changes. For example, limiting the thickness of single-use plastic to more than 50 microns. The theme for World Environment Day 2018, which was hosted by India, was Beat Plastic Pollution. Recent amendment to the Plastic Management Rules 2021, which has included the very popular Extended Producer Responsibility, EPR, under it. The aim of this thematic track is to get inputs from experts who have worked in the field of plastic production, recycling, and waste management. It is basically that the gaps in literature and data must be fixed. Knowledge sharing regarding existing policies, feasibility, and potential inputs from various stakeholders may come out of such an expert panel discussion. We are hoping that we will get insights on various opportunities for incorporating circularity in the plastic value chain that are yet to be tapped across various sectors. I look forward to this session, and I'm sure It will be a feast of perspectives for all the participants. Thank you so much, and I hand it over to Karthikeyan now.
Thank you, Dr. Dhawan, and I'd like to formally welcome all of you to this wonderful session on plastics and circular economy, making EPR workable. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Heinz Schandl, Senior Principal Scientist, Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization, and Coordinator. Dr. Heinz, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good morning, fellow panelists and participants. I'm going to share my screen, which is always a bit of an experiment. I hope it works immediately.
Yeah, it's working.
Yes, and if you wouldn't mind to tell me if you can see just one slide, because that is the intent. Yes.
Yes, it's yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I have got the honor to speak about our collaborative project between Indian and Australian research institutes to think about reducing plastic waste in India. The project, as many of you know, comes from the joint statement that the Indian and Australian Prime Minister had launched after their virtual meeting on 4th of June in 2020. And then a subsequent statement of the Australian Minister of Industry at that time, Karen Andrews, who has donated money for a research collaboration. As most of you know, plastics is a very well-used material in all aspects of the economy. We are using 300 million tons per year now in the global economy, but we only recycle 10%. India is using around 20 million tons now, but is on a very large growth trajectory of 7% per year. And plastic is used for almost everything: packaging, in building and construction, agriculture, in automotive industry, in the electronics industry, and many other sectors. So the question we've been asking ourselves in the project is, what kind of knowledge products would best help, and what kind of collaboration would allow to deal with the plastics problem? We are engaging in a number of activities. We are looking at the size of the problem, or you could say the size of the opportunity, by developing metrics and data sets to assess the magnitude of the plastics flow, but also to understand the plastic supply chains. Where is plastic in the economy, and where are the values, not just the quantities, but also the quality of the plastic? We are working on identifying innovation in technology, both recycling, but also in the way how we design products and services that rely on plastics, so that we can access the whole aspect of the circular economy. We are also working on policy and behavior change. And the project aims to establish a number of demonstration projects which can show how you can improve the current plastics economy and turn it into a more collaborative circular economy. One of the core deliverables of the project, which we are starting to work on, is a roadmap for plastics pathways for unlocking waste transformation in India for polymers. For this roadmap, we are interviewing participants from industry and government, and we are basing the roadmap on up-to-date scientific evidence. We are developing this partnership with industry and government, and we are outcome and impact focused. So we're creating knowledge products to enable real-world improvements in sustainability outcomes. If you think of the roadmap as a transformative moment, providing the information that government, industry, and academia has about plastics and the potential of circular economy, then we could think about short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals. A short-term goal could be a 1 to 3 year initiative, establishing an innovation partnership between industry, government, and the R&D community to identify the solutions which we could engage in from now on. Medium term, I think we need to have a target, an ambitious target, of reducing the amount of polymers that go to landfill or leak to the environment by 75% by 2030. And perhaps the 2040 target then could be to achieve a fully circular polymer economy through designing out waste and reusing and recycling of end-of-life materials. So when you think about this, the circular economy of plastics would really have 6 elements. 2 of those elements would be related to the material flow, to the physical flow of plastics. We would be looking at the use and collection, recycling, and using secondary plastics materials in manufacturing and in the construction industry, and then designing out waste from the get-go. But also we need to develop the markets for secondary materials and products that use them. We need to have consistent governance across different jurisdictions and across different communities. But in the end, we need to align with the zero waste culture that has become so prominent in the Indian, but also in some of the global projects. I want to briefly point you to the website of our initiative. So you see the web address here. It's Research CSRO AU and then RPYI. Because on that website, you find a lot of information about the partnership, about the research activities we are currently engaged in and the people who work in the project. There are in fact 40 scientists from India and from Australia who work on this research initiative. And already in the first year, we developed a number of products that kind of set us up or have provided the scientific background for the process we have now entered in, where we interview stakeholders from industry and government and ask them for their experience, for their view on how we can improve the plastics economy and turn it into a circular economy in India. These products are presented in reports, and we have at the moment 5 reports that you can go to. The first one is a material flow analysis of polymers and plastics in India, which gives you a good picture of the order of magnitude of the plastics flow and the pathways of where plastic goes in the economy. We have a review of community, industry, and public sector initiatives that can promote a circular economy for plastics. We have undertaken a review of policy frameworks to understand what kind of policies are currently in place in India, also to identify areas where policy strengthening could occur. And we have engaged with circular business models. When you would like to facilitate the transformation to a more circular system, you obviously need to think about the business opportunities that come with it. Finally, we have a report enabling behavior change, where we look at community perception, household behavior, and how the whole community can actually contribute to a more circular economy of plastics. I would like to end by expressing my thanks to all the contributors of this project, especially the partnership that we have with the Indian research organizations in TERI, Developmental Alternatives, and in the CSIR, is one of the most rewarding collaborations I've been working on over the 20 years in which I have engaged with this problem. So a big thank you to all of the collaborators. I encourage you to go to our website and to engage with our project. And I look forward to this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hines. That was a wonderful presentation. We were scheduled to have Sri Naresh Pal Gangavar, IAS, an additional secretary to the Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Climate Change. But unfortunately, due to a last-minute scheduling meeting by the Minister Bhupendra Yadav, he's been unable to come here, but he sends his regards. I would now like to hand over the moderation duties to Dr. Pradipta Ghosh, Distinguished Fellow, the Energy and Resources Institute. Doctor, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Katia. Let me add my own words of welcome to all the participants and the distinguished speakers in this session. The question of sustainable use of plastics is one of the foremost environmental challenges of our times. One of the most useful properties of plastics that they are chemically inert and not susceptible to biodegradation over a very wide range of environmental conditions, temperature, humidity, pH, and so on, is also the reason why they are such a huge threat to the local and global environment. Once released into the environment, they do not degrade for decades, maybe centuries, we don't know, and they simply accumulate and cause all kinds of problems. Plastics are, however, also for the most part, reusable as well as recyclable. The collection and aggregation of plastics waste is the key to ensure that they are in fact reused. And the key to ensuring this is that given the market price of recycled plastic, the cost of recycling, including cost of collection and aggregation, leaves a decent margin for the entrepreneur. Since the collection and aggregation of plastics are very labor-intensive activities, the question of whether or not the recycling industry will develop spontaneously depends upon the labor wage rate. And in India, at prevailing wage rates, this activity becomes worthwhile for a significant part of the waste stream. This activity is also greatly facilitated by the presence of the long-standing informal waste recycling sector, the Kabadiwalas, an institution unique to India. However, the activity is not worthwhile for all fractions of the waste stream, particularly some types of single-use plastics and plastic bags made of thin films. And it is these streams that largely pollute the environment in India. Now, how would an economist look at a solution? And the economic solution would be to supplement the wage rate of labor engaged in plastics recycling and perhaps recovering the cost of the wage supplement by cess on producers, which would amount to an explicit or implicit pollution tax. Variations of this on this theme underline practices such as EPR, deposit refund schemes, and so on. However, it is not always possible in practice to do this without creating perverse incentives and the attendant costs of monitoring and enforcement. And this is the real policy challenge in respect of ensuring full reuse and recycling of plastics in India. In this session, we will hear several distinguished speakers from industry, academia, and the government on the problem of plastic waste in India. And so now I would invite the panelists in turn. So the way that we will conduct this panel discussion is that each speaker would have about 5 minutes to present give his or her take on this question of plastics waste in India. And when all 5 speakers have finished, then we would give some time to the speakers to query each other on their presentations, and then hopefully we will have sufficient time for a discussion from the floor when we will throw open the discussion to all the participants. So now I would invite Mr. Hans-Peter Egler, Director, Sustainable Infrastructure and Public Affairs, South Pole. Mr. Peter Egler, you have 5 minutes for your presentation.
Yes, Mr. Kosh, thank you very much. Unfortunately, you can't see me. There is a kind of a problem with my camera. Sorry for that. But nevertheless, let me speak, and I hope that I'm audible and so can pass my words onwards to you. So first of all, many thanks for organizing this panel. Many thanks to TERI and to all the other participants. I think it's the right moment to focus on the plastics problem, the global problem, and what India could contribute to that. Actually, for me, as a former worker at the government, it's also a very interesting moment, and I just want to share quickly my experiences in the plastic sector in India, because it is exactly 20 years ago, in 2002, when the Swiss government, together with Indian entities, has started the first action in plastic recycling and a plastic collection at a more formal level. It is for me, therefore, a very interesting moment also to still be in this in this whole movement on trying to overcome the plastic challenges. And one of these, the fruits of this early collaboration in the plastic sector is actually the existence of an extended producer responsibility requirement in India. So we have heard there is a huge amount of plastic produced every day and turned into plastic, into waste. And particularly in urbanized states, there is a huge problem with this, what ends up in the marine system, because plastic usually continues to flow into the sea. So cities, because of the urbanized concentration of plastic waste, cities have an obligation for plastic waste management and need significant resources for the same. So the extended producer responsibility regulation, which is monitored by pollution control boards, can play a key role in integrating EPR rules with cities' obligations of waste management. At present, plastic waste management is dominated by non-formal practices, which make it very difficult to monitor and verify to ensure that the waste is not going back to the environment. While EPR sets responsibility of plastic waste management on the generation company, the private sector, so to say, in most cases, the current EPR practices lack a mechanism whereby the private sector can finance projects for the city which are at the forefront of plastic waste management. Hence, the real focus should be to link the voluntary market of plastic credits, a new approach, with EPR obligations, which would motivate companies to produce plastic, to purchase plastic credits, which in turn would help in better plastic waste management. Plastic credit is an instrument issued under plastic waste reduction standard from WERA, the standard organization, wherein South Pole is also a founding member. Plastic credits are two types: collection credits issued against monitorable and verifiable activities, enabling 1 ton of plastic waste collection, and on the other hand, recycling credits issued against monitorable and verifiable activities, enabling 1 ton of plastic waste recycled. While the plastic credit instrument is getting established for voluntary markets, it can also be an interesting, effective, measurable, and verifiable tool based on international standards to implement EPR. The private sector can invest in credits with the confidence of measurable impact on one hand, and on the other hand, the value or finance created from the credit, as well as monitoring framework, would ensure greater transparency and accountability at project level activities. Hence, it can become an interesting tool which can facilitating funding for plastic waste management from the private sector to cities. Our company, South Pole, under a project called Capacities, funded by the Swiss Development Corporation, is working with 2 cities to design and register projects under the standard, which could generate plastic credit and hence can mobilize investments from global companies, from the voluntary markets, towards city-level activities for plastic waste management. During the design, we interacted with multiple local private sector companies in cities who had shown significant interest in plastic credits if it is included into the EPR implementation tool. So you see, we are actually starting with a concrete activity to contribute to finally have a more recyclable and and say sustainable development of the plastic sector as such. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hans-Peter Egler, for your presentation. And I think, as you have mentioned, the key really is to somehow bring about synergy and a collaboration between the urban informal sector and the corporates in ensuring that plastics are recovered, aggregated, and recycled. So now I'll give the floor to Mr. Rajesh Pawar, founder and CEO, 21st Century Polymers, who is, of course, from the Indian corporate sector, and no doubt will bring his considerable, experience in the field, in his presentation. So, Mr. Pawar, you have the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Ghosh. Thank you so much. And thanks to TERI for inviting on this beautiful platform. And we heard our Honorable Prime Minister yesterday. Amazing. I mean, his commitment to environment is really amazing. And this is giving us all kind of support. I mean, policies are coming up for plastic waste management and many policies to help municipal corporations, etc. So let's see what we are doing for a little introduction. Karthik, please, can we move to next slide? Yeah, thank you so much. I'm representing my company, 21st Century Polymers here. So what we are doing is recycling plastic since 1989. We recycle polyolefins, means polypropylene, HDP, LDP. We recycle engineering plastics, nylon, ABS, polycarbonate, and high temperature polymers like LCP and PPS. PPS is replacing metals, and this is very helpful to make electrical vehicles viable. I mean, electrical vehicles are viable when you get a lighter car, and for get lighter car, you need to replace metal with plastics. Wastes are coming from households, bulk waste generators, waste aggregators, e-scrap recyclers, automotive recyclers, solar panel recyclers, and battery recycling companies. So we are recycling plastics coming from all these sources, and we are supplying mainly to automotive, household, and secondary packaging industry. Recycling units we have in Delhi, Rajasthan, and UP. 3 another units are coming within 2 months in Assam, Haridwar, and Haryana. We are operating material recovery facilities in Goa, Mathura, and Punjab with municipal corporation of these respective states, where we are segregating waste coming from households and bulk waste generators mainly. Assam unit will be operational in March 22. So our plan is to have recycling and material recovery facility in every state of India before the end of 2024. Karthik, please, next slide. We are first Indian recycling company to exhibit in NP USA. That was in 2015. And again, we exhibited there in 2018. Yes, and in 2018, there are some other companies also who joined us. We are the first Indian recycling company to exhibit in Arab Plus Dubai. That was also in 2015. We are member of Recycling Committee and Environment Committee of All India Plastic Manufacturer Association. So 1 or 2 achievements I can count on is with waste management. We implemented 16 waste segregation with UNDP in Panaji, Goa. When world is fighting over how to segregate dry and wet, so it was successfully implemented there in Panaji, and we as a recycler are buying 16 fractions of dry waste from households and commercial establishments. So that was a major success. Another success we get, and a beautiful project was with GIZ and TERI. This is of Barter Shops. So we started Barter Shops in same city, Panaji, Goa, and where consumers can buy their products in exchange of waste. And as a recycling company in the same city, we were collecting that waste and recycling it there. Next slide, please, sir. So this is the model I was talking about, 16-way segregation. So this was the project with Corporation of City of Panaji. It was their initiative and United Nations Development Program. So we were implementing partner there. So we create a system in housing societies and commercial establishments. Need of system is 40 square meter space only. And in that 40 square meter space, we give them jumbo bags, bigger dustbins, smaller bags, depending on the quantity of the waste. And collection was done by municipal corporation, recycling was done in the same city. It was the first time that municipal corporation bought waste from their households. We get waste in 16 fractions like paper, cardboard, PET and hard plastics, soft plastics, coconut shells, cloth, glass, sharp objects, metal, ceramic and melamine, e-waste, tube lights, batteries, non-recyclables, medical waste, and of course, medicine wrappers and all. Next slide, please. So this was the project of Barter Shops. This was again with Corporation of City of Panaji with GIZ and TERI. Here the shopkeepers exchange scrap with the products, and we collect that waste and recycle then and there in the same city. Next slide, please. So learning from material recovery facilities was recycling. A recycling unit in the same cities must to make these material recovery facilities project sustainable. Reason is what we learned there is the soft plastic. Suppose we talk about states where recycling is not happening in India. There are majorly 4 states, I guess, Delhi, Hyderabad, Mumbai, and Chennai, where recycling is happening. In other states, the volume of recycling is not that much high. So they have to transport their waste to another states. The same case was in Goa. All the low value plastics was not being collected there. Reason was the value of these low value plastics, say LDP or HDP, is 9 to 10 rupees per kg when it reaches to recycler. And when you transport from Goa to Karnataka or Maharashtra, transportation cost is 5 rupees per kg. Middlemen also need 1 rupee per kg. So you get the segregator gets only 3 rupees per kg, and it is not possible to segregate low value plastics at that cost. So having a recycling unit is must. That was our first learning. Second was technology. Yes, of course, we are well versed with the latest technology. We have been exhibiting world over. But if recycling units are not coming up with the latest technology of segregation and recycling, projects will not be sustainable. So that is required. Awareness about possibilities. I mean, when we are going to consumers and suggesting them, requesting them to do better source segregation, we need to show them what are the possibilities. What are we going to do with this segregated waste? Next slide, please. I'll show you what we are doing there.
Mr. Power, can you wrap up because you're already on time?
Okay. Yeah. Next slide, please. So these are the possibilities. Last slide, please. So where we recycle fish nets. Fish nets, there is a waste of nylon and polypropylene HDP. We segregate that. Nylon is recycled into base of these chairs where we need strength. And polypropylene HDP is recycled into top of these chairs. So these are the possibilities we are talking about. Can we move on to next slide, please? These are some other products. Next slide, please. And bottle to bottle, this comes into India recently. And this is the possibility we have to show to consumers what we are going to do with their waste. Next slide, please. So PWM rules, I'll take 1.5 minutes more on this PWM rules. So I guess CPs, these rules are, of course, there are many learnings for them also, and it took 5 years to come on this rule. And there are very many positive things, but something is missing. That's what I want to say. CPCB should include experts from waste collection and recycling companies to know more about what to do with the waste. And we need to learn from failures of West, where they are working on rules for the last 2 decades, or somewhere they are working for the last 3 decades. So we don't have to spend that much time. We need to move a bit faster. Third one is workable pricing system. Next slide, please. So here are some targets, EPR targets they have reduced, and very positive things with rules are they strengthen recycling. Thank you so much, and we will discuss further on the with the panels. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pawa, for your very insightful presentation on the practical aspects of plastics recycling, given the experience of your company, as well as your perception of the plastic waste management rules and how we need to take them forward. So I will now invite Mr. Ranjit Singh, founder Aspire Labs. Mr. Ranjit Singh, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Professor Ghosh. And thanks a lot to TERI for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to present my viewpoint. Unfortunately, I was told that it's more of a conversational thing, so I don't have a presentation ready, but I would like to share my views in terms of EPR and the role of EPR in plastic and how we can make it more workable. Now, EPR is a very, very critical policy tool, but EPR cannot be looked at in isolation. So we have to have a more integral view of EPR along with our waste management strategy, plastic waste management strategy. So that becomes the first most critical part of the whole thing. EPR is going to work only if it gets integrated with the overall strategy of waste management. So EPR in intent, also in implementation, must be aligned to the overall strategy, number one, and must help promote greater amount of plastic waste management. I would like to go over a period of time. If you look at it, Mr. Pawa talked about it. We started off on plastic waste, I think, in 1999, when for the first time usage of polyethylene bags were banned. Then we had in 2011 we had a EPR policy kind of a thing, which was repealed later on. Then 2016, 2020. So over a period of time, what we have seen is that the regulatory framework has evolved significantly. And I must appreciate that this time there's a lot of effort which has gone into devising this EPR policy after a lot of consultation with a lot of stakeholders. Could it have been better? Yes, for sure. But we have come a long way, and it's a very, very good beginning. That's there. A few things that I would like to point out. Number one is about the strategy. Broadly, if you look at it, we are talking about three things: reduce, reuse, recycle. Unfortunately, in this EPR and also in our plastic waste management strategy, what we have focused on more on reuse and recycle, but there's very little focus on reduction. Reduce and give incentive for plastic producers and plastic users to reduce the amount of plastic which is being used in packaging or the material. So that's one thing which is there. Second thing, EPR must try and promote whatever the bottlenecks are there in implementation and management of plastic waste. Studies have shown internationally, also in India, three most critical part. One is source segregation. Now, I do not see anything in EPR which helps source segregation. One of the most important part of the source segregation would be that we must educate the consumer. We must educate the household in terms of source segregation itself. That is missing. Now, whether EPR can be used for this or not, there's no direct linkage which is there. The second part, of course, is that integration, and someone talked about it, integration of the informal sector into usage of EPR funds to integrate the informal sector and upgrade the informal sector, improve the capability. Similarly, usage of EPR funds to one of the most critical bridges in this whole strategy is municipal bodies, their capabilities, their capacity, their skill levels, whether the EPR can be used for these purposes or not. No clarity on that or no incentive for that. Third, most important, or fourth most important part is technology, both adoption of technology and discovery of technology in terms of collaboration, etc. I think Mr. Heinz talked about in the initial this thing that he wants to collaborate with industry. Now, whether EPR money can be used for these kind of collaborations or not, there's no clear-cut incentive which is there. But I would like to keep it brief and discuss more about this. Couple of ideas, like we had talked about it, I've talked about it in the past. Zero waste. We have the bulk generators. SCZs are bulk generators. Housing societies in urban areas are bulk generators. We have large office complexes which are bulk generators, schools which are bulk generators. Now, could we have a separate policy of the bulk generators? In water, that has been used very, very effectively. Water, if I want to set up an industry today, I have to give a plan where there is zero water discharge. That plan has to get approved before I start operating my plant. And then later on gets monitored whether I'm implementing that plan or not. Now, for the developers, real estate developers, can we implement a similar kind of policy that no new housing complex is going to come up unless they have an approved zero waste system plan, and that gets approved and later on gets monitored. So these kind of innovations, these kind of a more wider way of looking at this whole EPR implementation possibly will have to be done. But all is not lost. We have come a long way as far as EPR regulatory framework is concerned. It's evolving. Few things which I would like to. The biggest problem, of course, is multiplicity of agencies which are there. You have the state and you have the center. You have various ministries. You have Ministry of Environment, Forest. You have the industry association. You have the polymer producers, and a whole lot of people are there. So getting all the stakeholders together, how do you get them together? A lot of effort has been made in the same, but more centralized way of looking at the whole thing has to happen. That has to be strengthened, number one. So more collaborative, which is there. I would like to, again, give an example. All is not lost. I keep talking to my colleagues in the industry when they get frustrated, is that look at GST. GST was implemented initially by the government. It took about 2 years to stabilize. The key to proper implementation was what? Key to proper implementation was, number one, continuous dialogue among the stakeholders. Number two, agility in terms of responding to policy changes. What are new issues came up in a big way? People are evolving and changing. Third is digitization. Very, very strong digital this thing. So we need to do that in EPR also. Fourth thing is that significant amount of monitoring. Fifth, not too much of regulatory overload, especially on the smaller producers. You cannot treat, there has to be some kind of prioritization, there has to be some kind of ABC analysis, which has to get done. The larger people have to become more accountable, because they have the resources to do it. You put all the burden on the informal sector, on small scale industry, they will collapse under the pressure of EPR. It will never get implemented. They'll find ways and means of getting around it. So key to the whole thing is people who are more resourceful, let's get them to solve certain big problems. Technology. Today, MLP is a huge problem, difficult to recycle. But in Europe, we are participating from our company in an initiative called CFlex. CFlex is an association of European companies who got together to trying to solve in a collaborative manner solution. There's nothing like that in India. Can the EPR fund be used for these kind of initiatives? Can the EPR fund be used for finding out, discovering new technology in collaboration with TERI, in collaboration with the Australian companies, which Heinz was talking about in the morning? Can we discover those technologies, especially for difficult to process, difficult to recycle products, like MLP, multi-layered plastic? There's no solution to it up to now, no viable solution to it. So we need to start having a relook at the entire thing. There's a lot of scope. It's a good start. It's a great start. There's nothing to get disheartened about the whole thing, but we have to remain agile. We have to keep changing. We have to be flexible as far as policy initiatives are concerned. And then I'm sure that we'll be able to solve this big problem. And we are not the only country which is struggling with this. Recently, McKinsey took out a study for 30 countries, they've said, a huge plethora of, there are about 94 regulations which are there in India related to plastic. Now, this kind of a regulatory overload is not going to work. We need to simplify things, we need to centralize things, we need to digitize. Last point which I wanted to make, it has to get more transparent. Nothing like pressure from the public in terms of for the industry, for PIBOs to make sure that they are meeting their EPR responsibilities. So those data has to get published, they have to be thing. And last but not the least, of course, is I think Heinz referred to it, that we need to create a market for recycled products. That's the most critical part, because ultimately the cost of recycling is more than the value that we add in the whole system. So there are two things which can be done. Number one is that at a very broad level, either someone like the industry or EPR, they contribute to the entire thing to meet that gap, viability gap, or the recycled product pricing itself goes up so that there's enough value added which takes place. And McKinsey study, again, I would like to go, people are willing to pay higher for more sustainable packaging. But there has to be certification related to that. Like we have organic, for organic, people are willing to pay more today. Similarly, for recycled product, I'm sure if we can evolve a certification system which is reliable, there would be a large number of population, large number of people who would be willing to pay more for that.
So, Mr.
That's another major initiative.
To wrap up, because you're already very much over time.
Sure. I mean, that's it. Nothing else. We can possibly discuss some of the views offline or. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ranjit Singh, and for these very practical insights into the whole question of implementation of the EPR and possibly of bringing about, an evolution of the EPR. And I think you've made an interesting analogy with the evolution of the GST system. And now we have three more speakers. I would request them to keep to within 5 minutes each so that we have at least some time left over for discussions. So our next speaker is Dr. Lakshmi Ragupathi. She is former director in the MOEF and CC. We were colleagues for several years in the ministry, and I had the pleasure indeed of being her colleague and working with her on some issues. So, Dr. Lakshmi, you have the floor.
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good morning, everybody. I think I should thank Dr. Ghosh for having the introduction of our old connections and in reminding me of the old connections. And of course, we have been still associated, sir. We are still in TERI together. In some way or the other, we are linked. And I should thank TERI for giving me this opportunity to speak on this most very, very much hot subject, what we call it as something which we started off in 2018 when we said the plastic, single-use plastic has to be banned. So the two extreme steps which I'm seeing, of course, my previous speaker has already narrated about the regulatory framework. Having been in the regulatory body, I always tend to go back to the regulatory framework and the plus and minuses of it. Now I'm able to visualize. And we used to always think of what will be the reaction from the audience or the participants or the community. And then we will involve anything in the regulatory framework. So the two types of regulations which came in the ministry, one was the top downwards, another one was the bottom upwards. The top downwards was usually on wastes and other things, because these wastes are usually under the Environment Protection Act, which was under certain scrutiny of the legal issues and courts. But the bottom upward, some of the regulations which came up, which were from the people and the community. And one of such things is the plastic waste also. Now, as far as the difference, the extreme steps which we were harnessing was, one was totally ban the plastic. Another one was stop production of the plastics. So I have to take there has to be a balanced view, because we cannot, plastic has become an integral part of our life cycle. So everybody knows about it, and we have to slowly see how to make use of the plastic. I think the earlier speakers have also focused on the reduce, reuse, and recycle phenomena and the use of EPR. EPR is a connotation which has been, of course, there in electronic waste, which I had dealt with for long years. And in electronic waste, the EPR modus operandi is very different. In plastic, if you look at plastic, it's not just stuck to the plastic waste rules. It's there in municipal solid waste. It's there in electronic waste. It's there in the plastics are there in the biomedical waste where it is not there. So almost all rules have some or the other reference to the plastics. So single framework EPR will not work. The involvement of various stakeholders and also to bring in a circularity, there is some intricacies in that, because as Indians, we never throw away anything in the first go. We only throw when it is absolutely not usable and it is soiled. So if we look at plastics also, because somebody referred to the informal sector, yes, there's a lot of recycling taking place in the informal sector, and that is why the plastic recycling companies, the formal recycling companies, are starved of raw material. This is the same feature in the electronic waste also. But here, EPR interventions will really help, because the channelization will take place to the proper recycling activities. That is one thing where EPR can help. Another one is the for the circularity. I have a feeling that circularity has to come from the community, because as community, if we are able to find ways and means of using it, reusing it, and recycling it in a proper way, then it will really work. So the involvement of all the stakeholders is very important. And the only orphaned activity is the collection activity. Collection, because you start realizing the plastic has gone to the dump site, and there the scavenging takes place. Or the plastic has been mismanaged, because especially the food waste, because now I'm working with another group called Foundation for Packaging. And packaging, plastic is maximum in the packaging. It's the packaging which is actually of concern, and packaging goes from food quality to the other packaging. And now we are trying to use other materials for packaging. In olden times, all the packaging was done by the natural material. So in which case there was a little concern. But now more and more introduction of the synthetic material is really causing concern. So in all these cases, if there has to be a sustainability, a packaging industry or the industry which uses has to ensure that it is coming back. Now, when I talked to, because 2 years back, just before this pandemic, I had been to a number of industries in Mumbai where they use plastics for packaging, like your cosmetic industry, like the industries which do bulk packaging, etc. In that case, the cosmetic industry says we always approach a new vendor for getting cheaper material, and they produce the material to our requirement and give it. So where do we link the EPR now? He is not the producer. The person who sells the product is not the producer for plastic. There is another vendor who is producing the plastic. So I now account for the version which was spoken for the plastic collection and associating with the EPR. The only thing that we can enforce through our systems, because I've seen in the electronic waste also, is the CSR activities. A contribution from CSR activities in terms of ensuring collections. Now, the previous speaker also spoke about the bulk waste generators. Yes, bulk waste generators are some very, very easy to approach. And the speaker who spoke on Goa, 16 different types of bins. I know about 8 bins in Goa, which I had witnessed. I have myself gone. At that time, I was working with GIZ. So the 16 bin principle, even then, can you sort the plastic to different plastics? Polypropylene, polyethylene, styrene. So all these things, unless a common man knows about it, this actual exercise may not yield us much. So there has to be a system for sorting it. Unless you sort it properly, you cannot distinguish between recyclable plastics and non-recyclable. First step is that collection, segregation to different streams, and then recycling. When you are using the MRF, you must have found that difficulty. I'm also witnessing a number of MRFs here in Gurgaon, and now they have set up 8 MRFs simultaneously for the municipal waste itself, the MCG, where I'm a committee member. It's becoming very difficult. So can we do that? That is the stage where we need a government help or a financial credit system where we can give. Incentivizing people, not today, in 1990s itself or 80s, I have seen in Europe and Sweden, where if you go and return a bottle, because we used to buy water bottles as tourists, we are there for a system, for a training program and all. When we give a bottle, they used to give us a little token change, whether it is US or Europe or anywhere. Why? They wanted to collect back and channelize it back. So that sort of a system in our supermarkets, because now that we have lot of malls and all, we can definitely do it. So they can distinguish between plastics, because each plastic stream will be picked up by the person. There we can associate to distinguish. Unless that is done, the plastic recycling may not be feasible. And the worst is the totally discarded plastic, which contains food waste, etc. That is going to be a big problem. So that is why our informal sector, what has been told rightly now, is what we found in the electronic waste, we should do it. We should integrate the informal sector to do this collection, segregate, educate them for segregation, because every consumer cannot be educated. But these persons or the shopkeepers or the bulk waste producers should be educated in terms of qualifying the plastic so that its recyclability is possible. Then only our EPR will work. And EPR has to be associated with the producer of plastic, not the producer of the product. Thank you very much. And circularity will automatically happen because we are a circular economy. By our nature, by our ancestry, we are into circular economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lakshmi Ragupathi, for giving us these these deep insights into how the regulations have been formulated, the philosophy and the thought process behind them. So now I will turn to Dr. Shilpi Kapoor. She's Vice President, Environmental Management Center, and she is also a TERI alumnus. So Dr. Kapoor, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ghosh, and thank you to the TERI team and my sister colleagues too for inviting me to be a part of this discussion. A lot of my insights which I would share, I would like to acknowledge at the outset that it is based on my learnings of a lot of projects which I did at TERI, including the work which I was part of under the Sistro TERI collaboration. So I will just share my screen. Just a minute. Just a minute. I think, some technical help. I'm not able to see my window. Okay, otherwise I'll just go ahead and see the slides from my things and say. So basically what I'm going to touch upon is a bit focus on the extended producer responsibility framework in context of India, which is there. And also before that, I'll just touch upon the need for circularity for plastics. So given circular economy, I mean, it's kind of one of the key narratives around sustainability, which is being focused upon both at the level of the economy, at the level of businesses. It requires certainly a set of comprehensive measures, which include macroeconomic level of measures and the sectoral interventions. So if we look at the plastics as a sector, certainly it requires a lot of these policy instruments to be in place to be able to take forward the circularity agenda. It certainly, circular economy has potential to generate a lot of economic benefits, which include competitiveness, improved business opportunities. It provides a platform for innovation. It has synergies with many other policy areas. So if we look at circular economy for plastics or circular economy in general, it is a key approach to decarbonization and will certainly facilitate our transition to net zero. To be able to implement circular economy, there's need for policy instruments, which include information, voluntary approaches, labeling, financial support, and a framework like an extended producer responsibility plays a key role. There was a report in 2019 by Accenture and FICCI, which clearly highlighted that India has a lot of potential to unlock economic value, and it kind of estimated that approximately $500 billion of economic value can be unlocked by 2030 through adoption of circular economy business models, which includes reduction in waste, energy, resources, improved utilization of products, product life extension, and value recovery from different waste streams. So moving on to the EPR for plastics in India, I mean, we do have the draft framework, we do have the rules which kind of very strong emphasize on the EPR, but there are still some challenges. Firstly, mostly the EPR in India is still looked at as a downstream policy. Mr. Singh really highlighted the key points around needing the focus around the upstream stages, also at design, etc. So I think that thinking is still missing. So work which is being done also in the context of EPR is more in terms of handling the waste as part of the EPR responsibility and lacks incentives for upstream and midstream innovations. So EPR was initially, of course, always designed to look at the entire life cycle. So there is need to address this gap. The draft EPR framework, which is there for India, foresees introduction of different models and with each associated with its institutional structure, actors, implementation, monitoring, enforcement, and will involve multiple licensing, registration procedures, committees, authorities. However, it's still not clear that on ground implementation of these models, what will be the role of different actors. So there are some mentions, but it's still fragmentary. Other challenges also linked to these models are that, yes, a country like India, which is so diverse, which is so large, certainly cannot adopt one model. So one size fit model may not be a good possibility. But then at the same time, if we introduce too many models, it might hamper smooth enforcement and implementation. Then there is a large share of the informal sector, and certainly that also has been highlighted. Dr. Lakshmi Ragupathi also emphasized on that. So it's very important how this informal sector gets integrated in these different models. So there would be challenges associated, and again, there is need to find solution to that. There's also lack of structure and transparency in the current system with respect to monitoring, traceability, enforcement. Recycler in context of the PROs, which is the producer responsibility organization, which would play or currently play a key role in plastic waste management. The framework also emphasizes that recyclers, waste to energy plant operators, even co-processors, all could be allowed to issue the plastic credits under the plastic credit model, which is one of the three models being proposed. But the challenge here could be that recyclers usually source their waste through informal sources. And if they are also allowed to behave like PROs, they may not have any incentive to improve the working conditions of this informal sector from whom they would source, because they would kind of continue with their current arrangement with some kind of formalization respected to their status as a PRO. Also, the difficult to recycle plastics, particularly the multi-layer packaging, which is a big challenge in India, may continue to still face the problems which it faces currently. Also, the EPR framework does not provide guidance on how the informal sector needs to be formalized. So it's very important that it's the inclusion of the informal sector should be encouraged and even mandated if required. The draft framework mentions that the producers, importers, brand owners will be at liberty to engage individuals through buyback schemes or collectively with urban local bodies. But there is no details about the engagement that details about how this engagement would be facilitated is absent. Also, there is need to have modalities for building long-term relationships with the informal sector. They've been operating for years. I mean, they are the key players. So kind of, if we are trying to integrate them, the relationship and the partnership has to be carefully thought out. It should be long-lasting so that they also see an incentive to be part of this formal system. PROs could provide incentives to the informal sector for the collection of low-value plastics and then tie up this collection with the existing recycling infrastructure and the companies involved in the recycling to kind of generate value out of these low-value plastics also. It's also important that if we are trying to integrate the informal sector, we also launch their skilling initiatives. I think this point was mentioned by the previous panelists also. And given that the informal sector also predominantly involves female waste pickers, it's important that their skilling is also emphasized on. So for this, there could be support through the state urban departments or the Council for Green Jobs, which could kind of facilitate this upskill, help the ULBs to upskill, come up with these upskilling initiatives for the informal sector and kind of accelerate the pace of formalization. For robust collection and assorting, infrastructure, of course, needs to be established, and that has to have the appropriate labor and safety norms. PROs could be considered as the only institutions issuing credits to the PIBOs, and there could be a manageable number of PROs, which kind of then facilitate the process. But it's important that their performance and the data which they generate or need to record is monitored. So the monitoring activity could be taken by CPCB or the SPCBs, or there could be third-party designated organizations dealing with that. In terms of the financial model for EPR, I think it's very important to leverage the different models for managing, particularly the difficult to recycle plastic, because plastics like PET already have an established value chain. So it's important that the EPR models bring in an extra focus on these difficult to recycle plastics, for which there may need to be a contractual arrangement between the private sector and the ULBs. There could be, say, a centralized fund or an EPR fund, which kind of has contribution from the producers. And then the money from this funds could be dispersed to the ULBs. And if that's the model being adopted, then of course it's important that it takes the contribution by the producers, takes into account the cost which is incurred in the entire value chain for collection, processing, safe disposal, in accordance with the full cost principles. Maybe there's also need to bring in the eco-modulated fees. So the contribution could also vary depending upon the different aspects around eco-design, etc., which are incorporated by the producers in their products. The other model could be, of course, the market-based mechanism, in which let the PROs be, depend on the market. So they kind of act as the compliance service providers on behalf of the PIBOs. And then they coordinate on the downstream activities in relation to the ULBs and the waste management operators. So it could be a completely market-driven process. Let them interact with the waste management companies, and then the pricing, etc., could be arrived at. This is my last set of points. Again, in terms of fostering further effective implementation of the EPR, it's also important that whatever there has to be accountability and mobilization of funds into these financial models, for which it's important that we have clearly defined achievable recycling targets, which could be set in a phased manner. So as if there are no targets for use of for recovery and recycling, it's not going to happen. And along with these targets, we also need targets to be in place for the use of recycled content in plastic products. So because that will then generate a demand for the recycled raw material or the secondary raw material. It's also important that the roles and responsibilities in the EPR framework are clearly defined, and with streamlined coordination even at the subnational level, whether at the state or the ULB level. And dialogue among stakeholders, of course, these platforms like today's webinar also is providing a dialogue for us to engage into for discussion in the topic. It's important that the EPR framework or the policy approach is complemented with suitable economic and administrative instruments, which need to be in a very systematic manner. So first, it's important that there are standards set for recycled content. Then there are these use of the recycled content into design at the design stage needs to be incentivized. So you integrate the recycled material in the design stage along with bringing about other circular design changes. And then, and for that, of course, it's also important that the recycled content, there's labeling around the products which uses the recycled content and along with the standard for the recycled content. So this in a comprehensive manner will then push forward the EPR implementation, where EPR focuses along the entire value chain. And lastly, it's important that we develop state-level awareness programs to sensitize all the stakeholders in the value chain, where the clear responsibilities are emphasized upon and the whole need for all stakeholders to behave in a shared manner is required to be told. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shilpi Kapoor, for these very useful insights and suggestions into how to carry forward the whole program of EPR and plastics recycling. And our final speaker is Ms. Ekta Naran. She's co-founder of Recycle. I don't know if I pronounce it correctly, Recycle, whatever. And so, Ms. Naran, you have 5 minutes. Please try and stick to the 5 minutes because we have already eaten into our time for discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ghosh, and thank you, TERI, for having me here. Yes, so it is recycle. The skull way is symbolic of, trying to create a better tomorrow or better cull through the activities. I think we had a lot of fundamental points already covered with all the speakers from their experience. And I would like to also quote like Mr. Rajesh Pawar, the Prime Minister, sir, from his speech at TERI. He began saying that, we talk about save the planet, but yes, we are trying to save ourselves. The planet is good on its own without us. So yes, talking about EPR and circular economy, I would just like to quickly share my screen. Just a moment, sorry. I think, no. As some the wrong window. I think it's a little slow. Just give me a moment. So I hope my screen is visible.
Yeah, that's visible.
Okay, great. So I would like to quickly cover, what we at Recycle are doing towards, collecting of plastic and helping circular economy and managing EPR. Very quickly about Recycle, we are working pan-India and working with more than 100 plus brands. We are managing almost close to 20,000 metric tons of plastic on monthly basis. We are primarily connecting the generators, the waste processors, and the recyclers. And we have a method of, working on this aspect digitally as well as physically. We understand that this space is very fragmented and they're managed by informal sector. So definitely 100% digitization method will not be very successful. So we are leveraging both the digital and physical solutions to empower the waste management industry and power the genuine circular economy. If you just look at this diagram here, we are trying to cover various sustainability solutions, which also has EPR and some take back programs, then looking into ESG aspect as well. We have also created a marketplace, which I think is the backbone of the entire vision at Recycle. We are also getting into waste infrastructure, creating certain, smart center solutions and working on some innovative methods of making collection happen in our country, like deposit refund system. So as we have already discussed a lot of fundamental problems, the practical problems, I would like to just quickly address on the problem statement at each stakeholder. We totally understand that this entire economy will work by collaborating the various stakeholders, starting from the generators, the collectors, the municipalities, the recyclers, and now through EPR, the producers and the brand owners have come in the loop. So each one of them have a particular problem statement, and at Recycle, we are trying to address through our physical and digital solutions to help them understand this. So I would just like to cover a couple of them, starting with waste generators. Definitely all the generators do have a problem. Even if we want to throw our waste at the right place, we don't know what is that right place. So we are building on various collection centers and doing some programs at RWAs, that is Residential Welfare Associations. Training is very critical, as we have already discussed in the previous, speakers have mentioned about it. So awareness is critical. So we are trying to do a lot of such activities and support them with certain apps where they can be aware that how this material should be, disposed from them. Then coming to the collectors and processors, access is limited to the local traders. So our marketplace is the place which is also here at the recyclers. You can see they connect the sellers and the buyers. A small kabadi wala may not get the right value of his material because he might be selling it to some other trader. Okay, he doesn't know the final buyer who is the recycler. So connecting the sellers and the buyers online is supporting this ecosystem, and I think this will bring the real traceable transactions of material And then, of course, this is all in terms of recyclable material we are talking about. And then that will help the brand owners to get the documents, etc., and fulfill their EPR through the various plastic credits that they can. Again, at municipalities, they have no access to real-time waste collected and processed under their jurisdiction. The Smart Center solution is supporting this activity. So I think I'll rush because of the time limitation. Overview of the entire ecosystem that we have built, the waste generators, whether it's consumer bulk generators or industrial waste, or the small kabadiwalas who are collecting the material, they can send the material to a particular point, that is the collection, that is to the collection or the pre-processing centers, which can be the municipality run dry resource collection centers or recycle collection points, or through our partners, the bigger kabadiwalas, where we have, you know, the forward thinkers who are making certain processes within the collection system. So this part is connected here, and then through this part, we ensure that the material is channelized to the right recyclers, and connecting them through digitization. As Mr. Ranjit Singh was mentioning, digitization is critical today to have a complete trace of the flow of the material. We manage the logistics, and for the brands, we have built an EPR platform for which they can, you know, get the plastic credits. So this is at a glance model for everyone, just to have an understanding. So Recycle is enabling a circularity through our integrated platform, which caters to the unique issues of each stakeholders, all the stakeholders in the waste value chain. And yes, segregation is critical. We all understand about that. So that is now going to happen only at the various smart center solutions, because at source, we find very minimal activity, and we hope that tomorrow with better awareness, there will be better segregation. So through these processes, we are just managing end-to-end traceability and transparency, market linkage pan-India for the generators and the recyclers, because even recyclers need the right kind of material, a certain quality of material, and a steady supply of the material. The digitization of collection centers to enable efficiency and optimization, and AI-based and in-person quality assessment, because these materials come from different sources, and as many speakers mentioned, they come in soiled condition. So definitely quality is very, very critical. Manually, not everything is possible. So there is a combination again here that we are bringing about at the collection centers, so that the right kind of quality can go to the recyclers. I would like to add a point that we all know that EPR is primarily for a design change. For the recyclers to be able to recycle the plastic, I think even the plastics design needs to be in that line. We need to talk about monolayers. We need to talk about monopolymers, because multi-layered plastics are only creating, they are not, as we know that there's limited means of recycling. So it is actually leaking in the environment and creating the major problem. So I think that should also be driven through various talks and other programs. And I think few brand owners are looking into this aspect. So yes, currently their primary target is to do the EPR fulfillment through. So with our pan-India network and the entire process that we have built in the field, we have also provided a EPR loop digital platform to the brand owners for complete audit proof, online documentation, material traceability, etc. So even the statutory reporting to CPCB can be done with a click of a button through this portal. This is helping to support the brand owners to be able to do their EPR. But yes, there are a lot of things which goes into the process. At Recycle, to understand the system better, in fact, we were associated with GIZ on effectiveness of EPR and impact on ocean-bound plastic. In fact, the study at Kerala Thiruvananthapuram is still on, and we are exploring how digital solutions, the Recycle's digital solutions, can further enable their work. So we look towards some positive and productive outcomes which can create better systems ecosystems of collection and segregation, and then finally the disposal. So we all understand that, a circular economy is restorative and regenerative by design. And I think by design, when we say the design of plastic is again very critical. What is the design of plastic? That everyone needs to talk about, and the brand owners should go into monopolymer packaging for helping the recyclers to be able to recycle the materials. Thus, my last submission to everyone is that circulate all the plastics in a manner that it is in the ecosystem and out of environment. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Ekta Narayan, for giving us this interesting overview on the activity cycle. We have actually completely exhausted the time for the discussion. And so we will actually have a discussion close the session for sure, because the schedule of WSDS is very tight and we cannot really spill over beyond that point in time. So now I will hand over the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Ghosh. And I would like to extend a warm gratitude to everyone who's joined us from across the world through different time zones and taking out their valuable time to address the session. I would like to also thank our partners, CISRO, University of New South Wales, Development Alternatives, CSIR, NERI, and the University of Technology, Sydney. Thank you everyone for taking out the time and giving us such valuable insights, which we will definitely use further in our projects. Further, I would like to extend a warm gratitude to Dr. Vibhathavan, Dr. Ghosh, and Mr. Shobhit Bhattacharya. Thank you everyone. Have a great day ahead.